Monday and back again today, so I do see some familiar faces. So for those who've been a part of these conversations before, thank you for coming again. And if this is your first time hearing about it or first time participating, thank you for being here. So I'm Dr. Effie McMillan. I'm our Chief Equity Officer. I'm joined with Frank Pantano, our Executive Director for Choice and Magnet, and Whitney Middlebrooks, who is our Project Director for the work that we are doing. You may have heard it being called Fostering Diverse Schools across the community, and sometimes people get confused with that. But a large part of what we're doing is trying to tackle the redrawing of residential boundaries, or rezoning is what you might most commonly hear it referred to in our school district. So this is our project team. One member was unable to join us tonight, which is Homan Atashbar. He served in the role that Frank currently serves in for quite a number of years, so he has a lot of historical knowledge that he's bringing to the conversation that's really helping us as we engage with the community and look at just our total landscape within the district. We have, I'll go back real quick.
I got it.
Okay.
Partners.
Yep, our partners. Just while I'm up here talking, we do have some partners that we've been able to contract with that's been very instrumental in helping us. We have Plural Connections, which is a research lab out of Northeastern University. They are a team of data scientists and engineers that is helping us to process all the information we're gathering. They're helping us to understand it, unpack it, and utilize it to help inform decisions. Urban Strategies, some of you may be familiar with them. They have been doing some work in the community, but they were very instrumental in our earlier phase of gathering feedback from the community and input. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. They're still helping some with just the coordination and organizational logistics and engaging families through this process. But we've been excited to be able to partner alongside people that could help us to have broader reach. So just how did we get here? Just to give some context, and Frank and I will tag team a little bit, Whitney as well. So how did we get here? So school districts typically analyze their residential boundaries in different intervals of time. So some may do it every year, some every couple of years, some every 5 years. It just kind of really depends. The last time that we've had a real comprehensive look at our landscape and how our boundaries are has been about a little over 30 years. So there was a massive redrawing of maps the early 1990s that rolled out with the choice plan. So if you're in here, some of you may have been students during that time or had children that were going through the school system during that time, or may have heard lots about it if you kind of grew up, lived in this area, or been part of the community for a very, very long time. When boundaries have been updated since then, it has been because there's a new school that's built, and you have to carve out a section to say any families that live within this section would be assigned to the school. So you would have to do that. We are required to assign every single student that we serve to a residential student. And that means we have to have boundaries that are created that assigns them to those boundaries. So the last time we've done it like a whole look, despite all the growth in our community, we've had about 100,000 people added. We have new neighborhoods, new housing communities, we have new highways, and all of that has changed over time. So it's really time for us to look at how we modernize or update those boundaries. What we've noticed, some conversations that happened before we really kind of started delving into it, is that we have a lot of transportation inefficiencies. Frank can speak a little bit more to, because he works with student assignment, of just how families are oftentimes lifting up the fact that they have this school that is very close to them, but they may be traveling a lot further to get to the school that they're actually assigned to. So we have those instances happening. We also had a push from lots of the community to look at segregation. We do know that we have socioeconomic segregation across our schools, and so we wanted to look at two things when we started this project almost 2 years ago. So we received a 2-year planning grant from the federal government. So it's no local dollars that are being used to really research, learn, listen, explore options, and really be a part of a planning process so that we know what types of recommendations to bring forth to the school board that can take us into the future. So we started out with trying to tackle really two things: the transportation issues around the maps that are being created by just the boundaries, and then the socioeconomic diversity. We're going to give you a little bit more information, and we promise we're going to give time for lots of questions and to show how you can delve into looking at some of the proposals that we have and to be able to give feedback. When we started this, there's lots of definitions out there on how people define socioeconomic status, so we wanted to be clear of what we were looking at. It goes without saying that income is a part of it, and sometimes income may be the only consideration. But we wanted to have a broader perspective and take into account the social aspects of it. So when we looked and used like census blocks, the American Community Survey, census tract information, it doesn't get us down to the individual parent or individual household or at an individual's level, so it kind of looks at large sections to help us determine like who lives within that area. So when we defined socioeconomic status, we looked at median family income, we looked at educational attainment. So if within that area people have high school diplomas, some college, advanced degrees. We also looked at the percentage of single parent households or two parent households, home ownership versus rental spaces, and then a percentage of population that speaks a language other than English. And why we looked at all those factors is because each of those factors may impact people differently. So we wanted to be as kind of broad and comprehensive as possible. Race is not a factor. Race cannot be considered in doing student assignment alone. And so we did not factor race into it, but we looked at all of these other 5 factors. Just to give you a little overview of what our journey has been. When we received the grant, we started out with just trying to explore and learn. We wanted to know about how students were assigned to schools, how many were in schools, what was kind of the movement from school to school, and just a number of different things. Then we moved on to kind of phase 2, and that was a really lengthy time of just trying to hear from the community. So this is where urban strategies really helped us. When we held these listening sessions, we really wanted to listen. So we didn't participate. So we got a little flack about district people not being there, but we really wanted unfiltered information. So we asked families to complete a survey, or anybody, I shouldn't just say families, but our community at large, families, students, parents, community members, concerned citizens, whomever, to complete a survey where they had to answer several questions, rank priorities, things that were important. And then in the listening sessions, we wanted to talk about hopes, fears, what they would like to see happen with the district, what were their thoughts about redrawing residential lines, particularly since it hadn't happened in a while. What were their thoughts around that? So lots of different conversation was happening. We were hoping to get as much information as we could that could inform maps, but knowing that we also have a strategic planning process that's also going on, that information could help to support the development of our 25-2030 strategic plan. Where we are currently right now is in phase 3. So we have some early draft maps. So you're going to see those in just a moment. Those maps were really created based on what we learned from the community and what came up in the survey and in those listening sessions. For some people, socioeconomic diversity was really a high priority. It was really, really important to them. So we wanted to see, based on diversity being really important, what's the best that we could do in terms of redrawing lines that could get us the greatest gains where socioeconomic diversity we would see the most gains there. What we also looked at, so I know I'm a little ahead of myself, but just adding in there, is that we also wanted to, because of transportation, they're members of our community, and part of what our project goals are is to improve transportation efficiency. So trying to have families have shorter drive times, children less time on the bus, and all of those things. So we looked at what is the best map options or example of what that could potentially look like. And there were some other learnings we'll talk about in just a moment. So right now, with those 3 early maps that are out, we are working really hard, and have been since late February, to hear from as many people across the community so they know what's going on, they can weigh in, give their input, so we can take into account all of those perspectives when going back to refine the map. So the next phase will be taking all of that information, refining based on what we've learned, and then coming back to the community again for additional feedback so that we can have the best possible recommendations to take to the board in August, September. Ultimately, the board would have to vote on what they want to approve and us to move forward with. And then it's going to take us a little bit of time to plan out implementation, probably all of 25, 26. And at the earliest any changes would happen would be 26, 27, and we're looking at how would we potentially do a phased-in process. A few other things just to share with you is that why was this important? A few different reasons. Bringing students together from different backgrounds. So there are sectors of our community and people that says this is really important, and we know it matters for long-term success of children when they are going out into a global society and are going to have to work and learn alongside people who don't necessarily come from the same places that they do and have the same backgrounds as they do. Some of our schools are overcrowded. And even when we talk to students, they will tell you, my school is overcrowded. We need more space. I had a student that said, please, y'all do something. She was like, I wish y'all would do something. So we do need to address crowding in our schools. Some of our schools are just under-enrolled, and so resetting our default lines can help to address the crowding and under-enrollment. We also are aiming to save money and time on transportation. And then number 5 was one of the things that we learned in the listening sessions that wasn't a part of the initial planning, which was keeping students together. So what we heard pretty loud and clear is what was important to families, and even what students said is that they want to be able to go to school with their peer groups from elementary, and then from elementary to middle, and then from middle to high school as much as they possibly can. They didn't really want to be split off a whole lot from their peer groups. So we know this is why it matters. We know maps don't fix everything. Just in hearing some conversations just here tonight, they don't solve everything, but it is an operational side of our district that we have to address. So we need help from the community for new rules, new ideas, and figuring out what's important and how to really tackle a big complex issue and do it in a way that is respectful of the voices across our community. So I'll turn it over to Frank.
Move this up a little bit. All right, hello everyone. So my position is Executive Director of Choice and Magnet, so I want to talk a little bit about what this means for choice and what it doesn't mean for choice. So this is really a process looking just at residential boundaries. Had a really interesting conversations earlier with someone here, thank you for that, where choice is always something that our community talks about, and talks about how it could have positive effects, negative effects, and it's really a political hot button issue that has come up many times and has sort of got tied together with updating residential boundaries. Dr. McMillan talked about how a lot of districts look at it every 2 years, every 5 years. One of the reasons that we've not done anything in 30 years is that we get caught up in this battle over choice. So we're really trying to start at the default and say, let's figure out these residential boundaries. Now the good news is, during phase 1, we did look and see, do these residential boundaries really matter? And the question was, how many kids are going to their residential school? Is everyone just taking advantage of choice? do these defaults matter? And the answer is yes, they do matter, because 70% of students go to their residential school. So we found that the majority of students go to their residential school, so we need to make sure we have efficient boundaries for those students. And in fact, some of the kids that are choicing out of their current school are choicing to the school that's closer to them. They're saying, why do I have to drive all the way to this far away school? I'm just going to choice this much closer school. So in a lot of ways, this can help some of the issues with choice without directly affecting it. We talked about the changes are not going to immediately affect where students currently attend school. Again, this is a planning phase, right? So we had the option to look into an implementation grant or a planning grant. We did choose to do planning because it had been so long. We didn't want to shock the community and try to change things really quickly. So instead, we're taking our time, talking to the community, hearing from the community, and trying to be incredibly transparent with this process, showing every step of the way. Here's these early maps. We know they might not be great yet. We need your help. Tell us how they're good, tell us how they're bad, so we can update them for the next round of maps. So it is a long-term planning. The earliest that any changes might occur would be the 26-27 school year. So the beginning of the 25-26 school year is when it'll go to the board to say, here's some better maps. Can you please approve us to start implementing these maps? So it'll take us about a year, possibly longer, to find the funding to do that, to make sure that we figure out all the new bus routes and do all those things that are important to do to make sure that it's seamless. And we also want to do it in a way where we're not uprooting students from their school. So we're going to make sure that, like the big example is, if you've got a kid in second grade and these changes take effect, we don't want to uproot that child and make them go to a new elementary school. Instead, we'd probably roll it out in kindergarten, and then it would work its way up. Or we might grandfather students in so that they can stay at their current school. So those are all things that we heard from the community. Hey, if you do this, please don't suddenly move my child. And we said, okay, we can probably work around that, especially while we're working on implementation. So I think Dr. Millen talked a lot about what we did during phase 2. We did hold 108 listening sessions and had 8,440 surveys completed. There were over 3,000 attendees at the listening sessions, and we ended up getting almost 12,000 direct and indirect engagements with community members. So from two perspectives, we were really excited about that because, if you're doing a sample size for a survey, usually, for 100,000, you might get 500 people. So we have almost 12,000. We're very excited to reach that many people. Plus, in other times when the district has gone out and tried to hear from the community, we didn't get all this engagement. And in fact, because we got so much engagement, our partners from the other group that work on strategic planning said, hey, can we get some of that data? And we said, of course, let's look at that data too for our strategic plan over the next 5 years. Okay, so when you're looking at the maps, which I promise is coming soon, when you're looking at the maps, I want you to keep in mind that it's not a vote. So you're going to see 3 exemplars. You're going to see 3 example maps. Effie mentioned a little bit that, each map was trying to do different things. So you'll see a map that does really well on socioeconomic diversity, but maybe not as well on transportation efficiency. You'll see one that tries to balance really well. And then you'll see one that doesn't do as well on diversity, but does a little better on transportation efficiency. So these are examples of possible maps. None of these maps will be the map that goes to the school board because, like I said, we're being transparent. We're showing you early drafts. We're just trying to show you some examples to get you thinking, to be able to give you something to go off of, to give us feedback and say, okay, for instance, we need more diversity in our schools. Map A looks really good. In fact, could we do even better? Or you might look on it and say, what do you mean you're going to make my kid travel further? That's like busing. We don't want to go back to busing. So there's different ways to look at that. Now, one thing I will say is that we had a commitment to not going back to old school busing, mostly because we probably couldn't afford it to pay for the transportation costs of sending students far across the district. But also because it was not what we heard from the community. The community told us pretty loud and clear from both sides, I went through busing. I don't want my child to have to be on the bus for a super long time. So even on the map that does the best on diversity, it only increases travel distances by a very slight amount, like 5 to 7%, very small change. So again, not a vote. It's an ongoing process. The maps are being updated based on your input. And for the timeline, this was on a previous slide, but we are collecting through April. And then after April, we'll take the month of May to make all those updates. Again, as you're looking on the dashboard, please make sure you hit submit at the very end so that we get that feedback so that we have something to work with. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about updates. From a software perspective, so in February we released like the 1.0 maps. And right when we released them, like I said, they were very early, and there were some things in there that really didn't make a lot of sense. We were saying that we're trying to increase transportation efficiency, and we had some sections of our community that were being bused much further to a much further away school, and we said, okay, we want to fix that. And we also saw where, since the community told us we want our kids to be able to stay together with their friend group, we saw where the algorithm was cutting neighborhoods into small pieces and making people travel through other zones to get to their school. So these early updates were some that we did to go from the 1.0 maps to the 1.1 maps. I don't know if I'm going to read all these to you, but they are posted on the dashboard when you go there. But basically there were some areas in the southwest corner of our county, also some things in Kernersville area, as well as because Brunson's getting a new address and Ashley's getting a new address, some of those things weren't taken into account, so we had to fix some of those as well. Okay, so here's the slide that we've kind of been previewing. The map priorities go down the left side, and it's kind of small, so I'll go ahead and read it to you. So the very first priority that we had listed there is socioeconomic diversity. And then if we go across the three maps, we can see how the three maps do on that. Map A is the example that says, okay, do as best as you possibly can for socioeconomic diversity without sending kids too much further from their address. Map B tries to give an average. So it does pretty well on socioeconomic diversity, but not at the cost at distance. And then Map C says, minimize the importance of socioeconomic diversity. Don't make it worse, because we don't want to inadvertently segregate our schools, but see how much gains we can get on school to home distance. And then if you look going down below home to school distance, you've got the 1 star for map A, you've got 5 stars for map B and C, and then another row says, that's the school feeder patterns we talked about. Map A, again, does not do a good job of keeping kids together. It splits them up to different middle and high schools more often, but it does help with diversity. The other two maps actually lower the number of times that students are split up while still helping with diversity. And then finally, that last row that just gets a check mark, it was kind of the non-negotiable. It was school capacity. It was how many students are we going to assign to a given school? We can't assign all 50,000 students to one school and 0 students to another school, so that works just as well for all three maps. So for those of us that want to see the numbers, as opposed to stars, I'll show you map A. Map A gives about 20%, 19% more diversity, but it does increase travel distance by 0.15 miles for those students who are rezoned, and it also affects the most students. It changes the most addresses. 24% of students would see a change in their residential school. Map B, that middle ground option that tries to do as well as it can in all the ways, it says that it only gives us a 9% increase in diversity. It reduces the average travel distances by 0.86 miles. So to give you an idea how big that is, the average distance right now students travel is about 3 miles. So 0.86 is between 20 and 30% better, which would hopefully help a great deal in how long kids are on buses and how efficient our bus routes are. It also affects only 19% of students. So again, the majority of students would not see a change, 81%. Map C has the least disruption because it only affects 15% of students. It only gives a 5% increase in diversity. It still does well on feeder patterns, just like Map B did, but it gives slightly better travel reduction at 0.94 miles. That's why they both got 5 stars. They're within less than 0.1 miles from each other. But again, it's another closer to 30% reduction. So those are the 3 example maps. But this is usually the part of the discussion where we ask who's already been on the dashboard and plugged in feedback. Can I get a quick show of hands if you've already been on the dashboard? Yeah, a couple people. So some people haven't. So I'm going to go ahead and play a quick video. And this,
In this video, I'll give a short introduction and walkthrough for this website. To view this website in Spanish, you can click here. As you may have heard, Winston Salem Forsyth County Schools is exploring updates to its residential school boundaries. These boundaries say which schools each student will attend by default. Last year, we reached out to the community to hear your thoughts and feelings about your schools and the possibility of change. You can learn more about what we heard by exploring the community feedback report here. After hearing and studying all your feedback, we now have first draft maps to show to the community. This website here is a place for you to learn more about the new map proposals and to give your feedback. These proposals are not final. We need to hear what you think so we can improve them before recommending anything to the school board. Let's walk through this website together. The first section gives an overview for the project and its goals. Please give it a read. One thing I will highlight: any changes to school boundary maps will happen in the 2026-2027 school year at the earliest. Students will not be forced to leave the schools that they are currently attending. For example, if a student is in elementary school, they won't be asked to change schools until they are moving on to middle school. In the next section, you can see a very quick summary of the 3 different map proposals. Hover or click on the information icons, or click on the See Details to learn more. In the next section, you can dive deep into the details about each map. There's a lot here, so feel free to spend as much or as little time as you want exploring. Click to expand. First, you see the maps. You can toggle between the 3 map proposals, as well as the current boundaries as they are today. You can see the boundaries for elementary, middle, and high schools. To more easily compare our proposal to the current boundaries, you can toggle the current boundaries on and off. You can also toggle to see concentrations of lower socioeconomic status, or SES. A key goal of this project is improving socioeconomic diversity in schools to reduce concentrations of poverty. This is an important part of giving all schools and students the same opportunities to perform well. Next, you can see how each school changes in each proposal. How much does the percentage of lower socioeconomic status students change in each school? How much do average travel times change for students assigned to each school? And finally, where do students go as they move from one school to the next? In the next section, you can enter an address to see how each proposal affects that residence. You can see how your feeder patterns change or don't change, and how the diversity and distance might be different in each proposal. In the last section, the most important section, we need to hear from you. Remember, these proposals are not final. We need to hear your feedback so we can make them better before recommending anything to the school board. In Part 1, let us know how you're connected to the school district, and let us know which map you prefer. Tell us what you like or don't like about it. This is not a vote. We will be taking all the feedback into consideration together to make improved maps. In Part 2, you can give us some information to help the district plan for any new changes. And in part 3, you can upvote different issues that we have heard from the community. What are some ideas you'd like us to recommend to the school board alongside new maps? Finally, feel free to write in anything else you'd like to share or anything that we missed. And please, please, make sure to hit the submit button so we get your responses. If you would like more help working through these proposals, or would like to talk about them with other community members, please register to attend a community feedback session. You can also contact us, or click these links to learn more about the project and how we went about making these maps. Thank you.
So at this point, if we had a really large group, we'd probably break up into smaller groups so we could have some discussions, but I think we can have a whole group discussion with as few as they're here. And of course, any questions you want to ask, 100% open. But here's just some possible question stems. What things were confusing from what we just talked about, from the maps? Was there anything that surprised you? Are there any concerns that you have? And does anything look exciting? So this is the part where we opened up. Raise hands and, oh, I got mics, cool. Oh, yes. Okay, thank you. Come visit.
We have 4 schools that are not considered in this group, and all of which are low-income, basically African-American schools. We can't discuss race, and that's called a good thing, because race should never interfere in anything. But it does come across to people who don't know any better as legalized segregation. But we can discuss socioeconomic status. Now, how does that school's socioeconomic status compare with the other schools so that they should not be considered? What is their, I mean, it would be good PR to discuss their socioeconomic status rather than just to have them excluded from the discussion.
What 4 schools are you speaking of?
Cook, Brunson, and there are 2 others that are not even mentioned in any type of discussion.
Oh, Cook, Brunson, all schools are in the same, there's no school, none of those schools are missed out on, they all have boundaries in this map.
That was not my understanding from last discussion.
Yeah, so maybe I can help. I know when the conversation was brought up about the cluster of schools, so all schools, no matter where they are, we have to assign students to them. I think part of the question that came up last time is the schools that are in such close proximity to each other that are just not really seeing change. It's my kind of recollection from it. So like when you mentioned Cook, like Ashley, I think they're all, we were talking about that last time, where they're all in such close proximity to each other, and they fall within an area that has a kind of a dense area of concentrated poverty. And so what we're trying to hear from, what we want to hear from community, I think I may have said it last time, and if I didn't say it last time, I probably have said it in some other conversation, is that is one of the things that we continue to grapple with too, because to see changes in terms of socioeconomic diversity for the schools that you've identified, with any kind of like real significant change would mean to send kids further away. It would include those longer bus rides. And one of the things that we've heard is that families don't want that, but we're still trying to hear from the community about the things that are important. I know some of the conversation that came up last time is indicating that maps don't solve all things, so what are some other ways in which those schools that you mentioned also can be supported. So there were some other ideas that were also generated out of the conversation. So
But
hopefully.
those kids will not be transported. They will be attending that school just as it is
Well, we don't
now.
have anything that's final yet. We're still much in a phase of trying to gather information about what recommended changes should happen. So we're still in that process. When we looked at all the feedback that we got and then looked to see where we can maximize diversity in schools or distance, a map that was really prioritizing distance and one that was trying to like do all of the things. Still, just because of, and I said, I'm pretty sure I said this last time, the challenge that we continue to grapple with is proximity of those schools that are within, 1 to 2 miles of each other, pretty much.
Yeah, got it.
A pretty dense area that they're pulling from that's all within the same area, and the difficulty of trying to make the shifts. Like, it's not that we don't want to. We're trying to figure out how do we do that and how do we honor that for even staff members that work in those schools that say they want more change than what we've been able to capture so far. So that's something we're grappling with and really need feedback on.
Is there going to be a plan?
That's what we're in the planning phase for now, to hear. And so Frank maybe can speak a little bit more to that too.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little confused about the distinction. So there's those 4 schools. I got them up on the picture. Those 4, like that little parallelogram, the 4 dots in the middle. So one of the things that this process is trying to do is help those schools, because right now the zones are really strangely shaped, and we're trying to make it so that all those families have a shorter distance to their school. But the issue is, because they're so close to each other and it's the same neighborhood, basically, it's not easy to get real big gains in socioeconomic diversity because everyone around that has a similar socioeconomic status.
That is my exact point.
Yes. So the solution for that is probably outside the scope of what we can do as a school district. We would love to, not have concentrations of poverty based on where people live, but it's not something that this process is able to make a big change for. It's something that I'm passionately hoping to do something about with, and I think a lot of people in this room probably would as well. But as far as boundaries, we're not able to make very big changes unless we were to bus children from further away, which we legally can't per the Supreme Court.
Yeah, so that's the last time we talked about that, when that
Yeah.
came up about the school, because I remember somebody stood up and said, there's just not a lot of games there. And I said, we are grappling with that. That is something we're grappling with too, as we're trying to look comprehensively and not say the kids would be,
What do other states do in a situation like this? We can't be the only one.
Other states have the same exact problems as we do, and a lot of them, as it's one of the reasons why the two of us are co-leading this project and feel passionate about this project, is that residential boundaries in most places are updated all the time, every 2 years, every 5 years, sometimes every year, and a lot of times they don't take socioeconomic diversity into account at all. And it's one of the ways that our country has resegregated, is that just for transportation, they keep updating it. Okay, well, this is closer, this is closer, this is closer. And those neighborhoods having similar socioeconomics to themselves has caused us to move towards more segregation. In this process, we're trying to make sure that we do no harm, right? We're trying to make sure that as we update, we are still giving a weight to socioeconomic diversity so that we don't inadvertently segregate as we do what is really kind of right, more so than what it is now. But it's kind of a boring process, right? It's an operational thing. It's a thing that the state says you have to have efficient residential boundaries and you have to have efficient bus routes. So this is really sort of a boring operational thing that all districts need to do. But we're trying to do it in a intentional way that's not going to further segregate and hopefully desegregate some. Not as much as we'd like, especially in some schools, but at least not make it worse as well.
yeah, a lot of urban areas have the same, districts have the same issue. When I think about even just districts, urban areas in North Carolina, the way, it's so much by design, like how you see how the county, where people live, where things are situated is that way. I know we talked about last time, some people gave some other ideas that, like, if maps don't help to make progress on that, what are other opportunities? So some people did bring up the possibility of magnet schools, of doing that. And so, like, Frank in his office just received a grant to really make tremendous improvement and focus on Parkland, Flat Rock. I always forget the third one. What is that? What was the other one? Paisley.
But
And
even if
Conoke
you have
Elementary.
magnet schools, aren't you still going to have busing for them?
So transportation, we do try to provide transportation, but our transportation department is looking at that. That's a little separate from, like, just the default of residential. Typically, when districts have magnet schools, they have the transportation that's for residential kids, and then they have, like, other tiering processes or whatever for how they do magnets. So some districts may do like a transportation hub, so children could be picked up at their home, and there are specific, like, sites where buses go to, and children might transfer buses, or they stay on that bus to get to. So there's, like, different options that transportation departments do to accommodate families for a magnet. So, like, all of those things are things that plays into how transportation has to function and work for a school system. So, no, great questions.
It's just very concerning to see them not even addressed in a plan. That's what is very concerning to people of color and people of concern for what's going on in the community.
Right.
There needs to be, a place to address it if you have an idea. The magnet school is a grand idea.
Yeah, and I have an example too. So I kind of went through it really quick, but the early updates that we did, one of the first things that one of the first things that a certain part of our community got very, very upset about when the first maps came out was they saw Clemens area schools moving from Clemens Middle and West Forsyth High School to Flat Rock Middle and Parkland High School. And they were saying, we don't want to go to those schools. Those are quote unquote bad schools. And those are schools that have a lot of socioeconomic segregation that we need to address. And so a much bigger grant than this one is going towards those two schools. Two of those schools are on that same list. So of course, when I'm giving this talk and going into these things more fully for the people that are living in that area that are really upset about things, I always say, like, you're gonna regret not getting to be at Parkland because we're gonna have this incredible IB program there. There's gonna be a wait list, similar to what happens right now with Atkins, where a lot of people are trying to get into Atkins, whereas in the past it was a school that people said we don't want to go to. So I think magnet schools have a history of working. Another example is Spies Elementary. So in 2014, Spies Elementary was greatly under-enrolled. It was 99% free and reduced lunch. Currently, it is one of our most diverse elementary schools in the entire county, and it's over-enrolled. We have a wait list of kids. So, and that wait list, in fact, is one of the reasons why Conoke is another elementary where we're bringing in a magnet, so that we can have somewhere for those waitlist children to say, okay, well, we're out of space at Spies, but here's this other great school that also has the IB program and the DLI program. So we really are trying to find other ways, like I said, much more interesting things than just this sort of operational update to maps.
When you put your list of suggestions for the people, add something to that. Because why should I go in and talk about what you've got there? Because everything that you have listed is really, really good. Provide a place for people to give to suggestions for the schools that are not listed.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll do that. And I think that's in that last section where there's upvote spots. I think,
Yes.
I don't know if magnets
specific for the schools that
Yeah.
that are not mentioned there.
Great feedback.
That are to give feedback. What should we do for the schools that are so close together that are not dealt with? you know, make a magnet, provide busing, provide anything for them.
Yeah, that was just last week. So we've been having these probably 3 to 4 nights a week for several weeks now. We've been going pretty strong. And so we appreciate that, because even that type of feedback is beneficial, because one of the people who participated at the session that we actually had at Parkland last year graduated from the school system here. She talked about her experience of when she had to change schools every 2 years and the burden. So she was worried that it was going to go back to that. But she works at one of the schools that you mentioned, and she was talking about, and another gentleman had come in and said, you know, it really is time for us to look at all of this and make changes. And we said yes, but we need the help from the community to help drive the process and what some of those
But if
recommendations
the
should
community
be.
doesn't know,
So we are,
Let
that's,
them
so
know.
like you being here tonight and all of the times that we have gone out, we have continuously been asking anybody who has participated to please share with family, friends, community members. We've been trying hard to get all the information out. I would just say to everybody in here is that this is not the end. As Frank said earlier, this is long-term planning. It's not just, we're gonna talk to y'all today and then we're done. We are collecting feedback. We wanna refine. We know every area doesn't get movement in ways that they want to. So there's gotta be other recommendations, rules and things that have gotta come up. We need those recommendations. When we come back with the next set of drafts, we're gonna be coming back to the community again for more feedback. And so we really want to take to the board a comprehensive plan that speaks to the maps, but then also be able to come alongside and say, here are some other things that the community said that's really important. So we've heard things like allocation of resources, we've heard programs, we've heard a number of things, and working with our data scientists to really just kind of digest all of what we're hearing. Not only just hearing, but what is people are putting in the dashboard to help us make some decisions. We know this won't solve everything, and we won't be able to fix everything all at once. So it's gonna be some work ahead.
baby steps.
Yeah,
Just
there's gonna
give
be
us
some work
steps.
ahead. Absolutely.
Now, I was, as we were talking here, now how are the charter schools included in this also?
So no, that's a good question. So charter schools are not part of the public school system. We work for Winston Salem, Forsyth County Schools, the public school system here, so we don't have any say over charter schools. In fact, in a lot of ways, we're competing with the charter schools. We're trying to keep students staying at our public schools so that we're able to continue providing high quality public education. As you may know, charter schools have different rules than the public schools, so sometimes it's difficult because they're not legally required to provide transportation or lunches or IEP service and stuff like that. So to us, we're biased, of course, but we feel that our public schools are the best options for our students and provides all those guardrails for our kids. So no, none of this will affect charter schools in any way.
And also that this current administration under Donald Trump, they're wanting to get rid of public funding for people that are talking about the same thing we're talking here. So so what we're talking about is the mute. I mean, like, we're going through all of this, and then we get to the school board, and they're saying, well, we're not able to do this. So how is this going to affect? I mean, of course, you're going to have some kind of
Good. It's a good question. So I think it's one of the reasons why we have been very focused on our dual goals of both transportation efficiency and socioeconomic diversity. So first of all, the memos and things coming from the federal government telling us about cease DEI, stop all these different things, all of those things are very specific to race, very specific to student assignment, and they have Supreme Court precedent law to point to and say, look, you're not allowed to assign students based on race. And so from the very beginning of this process, before the Trump administration, we were already following that rule. So we're not in danger of it being shut down because it's race-based student assignment. It's socioeconomic. In fact, it's interesting, in the memo that the White House put out, it specifically mentioned, well, what about the poor white families? Well, since we're looking at socioeconomic, we're actually going to help the very people that they were complaining weren't getting help. So there's that. There's also the fact that, I can't go into specifics of this, but I work closely with the school board, and part of my role is helping families get to a school that makes sense for them. So in student assignment, one of the things that I hear about a lot is families calling me up and saying, why in the world am I zoned to this really far away school? And this sounds like an overreaction, but it's actually true. I can see another school across the road that my kid could walk to that's not my residential school. These maps fix that. And what's interesting is that I mentioned the school board because if we deny it because there's not enough space in my office, it then goes to the school board, and I'm on a panel with the school board during a hearing, and we had some hearings, and one of the families was like, look, here's a map, here's a picture, look, my kid could walk 0.4 miles on this path to the school. And the school board turned to me and said, why in the world are our residential boundaries that way? And it's the same people that are trying to stop this process. And I said, well, look, we're trying to fix it. So a lot of ways, it's why I keep mentioning that this is a boring operational process to update things. And of course it's a socially aware, boring operational process where we don't want to make things worse, and we do want to try to make some gains for socioeconomic diversity, but we also don't want it to become another political football to get kicked around based on those things. Does that all make sense?
So I understand what you're saying, but I'm still kind of concerned that you go through this process and from the federal down to the state of running with this idea about diversity. So come 26, 27th school year, and they're saying, no, you can't do this now. What was all of this footnote? This will become what for what? If we're not going to get the funds to move students or wherever we said it would be more convenient to them. So
Right. Well, the good news is that
something that has to be addressed to the school board versus you all, or is this something that you all can take to them as an idea that has come up?
yeah.
They probably know, I think you may already know.
Yeah, so there's different ways that we could implement, and one of the ways that we could implement could be at a financial gain. So like as far as needing money to go further, we don't need more money to go further with this. We've already sort of paid the people building our models for us. We've already, hired a project director for this project, and we've done all those things. So now it really does just come down to something that can be built into a regular process of a school district. I mentioned how other school districts look at it every 2 years, every 5 years. That's going to be part of the recommendation to the board is, hey, we can't let this go 30 years again. Let's have a process where we check every 5 years and update. Even outside of, like the Fostering Diverse Schools name, of course, has, because of all the press about diversity, has been something that's been a point of contention, but it's just the name of the grant. It's the name of the grant. The process itself is not just about diversity. It can help with socioeconomic diversity, and we want that, but it's not the only thing that's happening, and there's enough other stuff, and we have the different map options where if they say, well, we don't think diversity should be the main goal. Well, here's map C where it's not, where we just get these other better things. So that's how we kind of tried to preview that and plan for that eventuality.
I appreciate you asking that question because that is, of course, something that we always think about in front of mind, and we have a very diverse school district with about 30% Hispanic, 30% Black, about 30% white, and then smaller percentages of other students. And so we do have a responsibility to serve students and serve them well. And none of the things that we're doing are in violation of federal law. I will say, because it came up in another conversation, I can't even remember where it was, but they kind of brought up the same thing. How about if you've done all this and then it really just goes nowhere? I think one of the values that we've had is that a lot of information that we receive would help with reimagining these boundaries and redrawing them. But so much other stuff came up, like the young lady who mentioned, like, what else should we do? So through this process, we've been able to engage the community more robustly than we would have been able to do without those resources. So much of what we heard is helping us to also learn about other things we need to do or stop, improve, that would work on the academic, the social, emotional well-being of students and things like that. So I look at it kind of twofold. As we were able to get information that can help to inform maps. We still need feedback on that. But so a lot of the other information helps us in so many other ways. So it's been beneficial in that way too. So, yes, ma'am. I know you had a question. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to make, you all were saying it's been about 30 years before you did this, and I'm hoping in your new planning, if you got to do something different, you won't wait 30 years, because 30 years is a long time to try to correct some things. And the second thing I was looking at, when you put your numbers up there, it said 19% in A, diversity. And then when you get to B, it says 9% diversity. And then when you get to C, map C, is 5% diversity. Now, before you end all of this, I am hoping that you can bring the gap together. Is that a plan of y'all's as well? Because when you look at that diversity gap, that means a lot of children is left out. And so when you get to your final numbers, I'm hoping these numbers will be much, much closer.
So, thank you for that. Just to bring a little clarity around those numbers with those percentages, based on people who participated in that first round who said diversity was really important, what our partners and us worked together to do was to say, if we only create maps that's going to improve diversity, what's the best that we can do? The best we can do is to increase diversity by 20% across schools. That doesn't mean every single school is going to necessarily see major change. Some see minimal, some see a lot more, some see really not any at all. The second map, those percentages are the way they are because it was focused primarily on home to school, right? Home to school distance. So what is like the best map we could get that would get families close to their school so they didn't have far distances to drive? The last map was trying to do all three, make movement on all three things. So trying to improve diversity, trying to make home to school distance better, and trying to improve children being able to stay together with their peers from elementary to middle to high school. So like what was the best that we could do based on trying to do all three of those things? So that's why you see a difference. I think the thing that we're also trying to hear from the community is what are the things that are really important that can get us moving in a path of better transportation, helping kids stay together, because even the children are telling us they want to stay with their peer groups, and improve diversity across schools, knowing that we have other things to do too. So that was really kind of why those percentages are what they are. And based on what we hear from the community, like all the things we're trying to learn from the community helps us to know what people really like about Map A to get to greater diversity, what they may like about Map B, and what they may like about Map C, so we can try to have 1 to 2 maps that we can take to the board that they can weigh out and that the community can look at and weigh out and say.
Next thing is,
Yeah.
with all of that, then is transportation will play into how the children is moved.
Yep.
Whether the ones in the neighborhood will be able to stay where they are, or would you bus in or bus out? Or would it go what's best for the child and the community?
Yeah, we definitely want it to be student-centered and based on what we're hearing from families and community, to really drive the process and to drive whatever recommendations are happening. So students who are assigned to a school, this is their residential school that they're assigned to, we provide transportation for all of those kids.
So all schools will be provided.
Yes. So if I live here and I'm assigned to what elementary school? I went to a food pantry on Saturday, and the school was Abraham Elementary. Let me do that one. It was out in the Walkertown area. So if I lived in that area, I would be, by default, we have to assign a child to a school based on where they live and how boundaries are drawn. So based on that, if I'm assigned to the school because this is where I live and the district has to assign you to a school, you receive transportation automatically for transportation from your home to the school and from the school back home. Where transportation is not provided, I know Frank can speak to this a little bit more, is the way choice operates in our district. So right now, we have residential boundaries, and then we have clusters or schools that make up like a zone, and I can choice within that zone and get transportation. But if a family says, I don't want my child to go to the school they're assigned, I don't really like the choices that are in the zone, and they apply to go to a school outside of that and there's space and they actually are approved to go, then that's when we don't provide transportation. Am I right, transportation? Then that would be a time that we wouldn't provide transportation, and parents would be expected to provide transportation.
Okay, and final thing I wanted to say, I keep going back to the 30 years, it's been 30 years.
Yes, ma'am.
And hopefully when y'all do this new plan, maybe you could get to at least every 10 years. So hopefully we'll be able to look at something like that.
That is a great comment. Thanks so much. And we need that voice too. If you would please put that in the dashboard for us. All those things you just said. And I think it was a really good juxtaposition of the gentleman who talked about, well, in the current political climate, what could happen. I hope that helps you understand why there would be a map C, right? So the idea is, instead of the political climate stopping the entire process, plus 5% is not good enough, but it's still plus 5%, right? So that we want that to be the lose condition, the end goal if the thing stops, as opposed to just staying with the status quo and going 35, 36, 37 years without a change.
And just while you're coming forward, just to keep in mind, when we talk about our 30 years, we're talking about a comprehensive look at the district as a whole. It's like every sector. Every sector. Where we have made minimal changes or some changes is just when new schools have been built and you've got to assign students to that particular school. So that's when change has actually happened, where you have to take some from here, take some from here, and you pull them here. We just haven't taken a look across the whole system, even though I tell people all the time, I've been working for the school system now going on 6 years, and I don't get to work the same way that I did when I started, because now there's a whole new highway that I kept looking and seeing them build. And then I no longer have to go on 52 anymore, which excites me every single day. But that is a real change. And you see that with new roads and new neighborhoods and stuff like that. So this is a part of a process for operations that we have to look at and should be looking at more frequently, so that we're not waiting so long. And we're trying to take our time with this and it being long-term, because we also don't want to just abruptly disrupt families. Like we had kids today, and some of the kids said, so are you telling me I've got to change schools? I said, no, baby, you don't have to change schools. Like they were really concerned that it was like something immediate was going to happen, or, and we was like, no, this is what's going to happen. They was like, oh, well, that makes sense. So we don't want to just do that in a way that could cause harm to families, but try to think through every possible scenario that families are bringing to us to help make decisions. Yep.
Okay, so we've talked about the fact that these are residential boundaries have not changed in 30 years. Just for context, when our current maps that we see today, 2025, when that was changed, I was a sophomore in high school. And what that change did for my family specifically, I have a younger sister. There is a 5-year gap between she and me, myself being the eldest out of the two of us. In any family that has siblings, multiple children, you're going to presume that the younger one is going to go to the same school as the older one. You're going to follow that progression unless, say, the younger one comes up and they're really artistic and you find a school that suits their needs. My sister and I went to the same elementary school. We went to the same middle school. When it came time for high school, when the current map we're looking at today was implemented, I was at West Forsyth. My sister, same household, went to East Forsyth. I had an option that was presented to me and my family to change schools so that both my sister and I would end up being at the same school as she was getting ready to come up. And out of all the schools that were in the district at that time, none of them fit the current curriculums and courses that I was taking, but the major issue in that was that there was no guaranteed transportation for me to go to the school that my sister ultimately went to. And even when she started going to high school, there was transportation for her to go and possibly to get back home, but ultimately my mom and I ended up driving my sister back and forth to school every day because there was just that no guarantee of that. So fast forward to today. And I agree, we should not have to wait 30 plus years later to rethink about this current issue. I applaud this program's efforts to diversify our schools and, to make them as equitable and equal as possible. But I cannot see that happening completely because our communities are not equitable and equal as possible. We have, as the young lady said in the back, schools that are in predominantly African American or Hispanic communities. They serve those communities and probably have been for a number of years or decades. But when you want to add more diversity to them, that includes a transportation issue that we already have in place right now. We do not have enough bus drivers, we do not have enough buses, and someone mentioned earlier magnet schools. With specifically, my daughter went to a magnet middle school. If I wanted to put her on a bus every day to go to that magnet middle school, I would have to drive her to her elementary school that was in Kernersville. We live in Winston Salem, on the north side of Winston Salem. I would have had to drive her to her elementary school, put her on a bus so she can go to her middle school, then repeat that process in the afternoon.
Yeah.
That math and that gas was not working for me. So during that time, I was blessed to be able to transport my daughter to school, and I still do. There are families in our community that don't have that blessing. So, there's so many layers and so many factors in what we're trying to achieve, and I applaud them, but we also have to think about our communities. With myself specifically, I grew up, and I'm going to presume everybody will understand this next statement. I grew up on Cameron Avenue here in Winston-Salem. The original Atkins High School that still stands today is now Winston-Salem Preparatory. Sir, the distance between my home to Atkins is the distance between you and I sitting right here. I could walk out of my house, walk down my driveway, look down the road to see if the lights were on at Atkins. I did not go to Atkins as a middle school. I did a 15-minute walk to Kennedy and a 45-minute drive to West Forsyth. And I understand the frustration when these maps was originally done, and now they're the current drafts that we see today for parents who live in the Clemens-Louisville community not wanting to have their students bused to say Parkland or Flat Rock or Cone Oak or any of the school that's outside of their neighborhood when Louisville and West Forsyth are literally a knock on your door, stone's throw away.
Yep.
That is what we are trying to achieve with these maps, is keeping our students within the communities for which they live. And yes, we want to keep students together with their friends because it does make it easier when you're going from elementary school. If you've had friends who it's pre-K and doing the same thing for middle and doing the same thing for high school, it makes your social activities a lot easier. But once again, if our communities are not diverse, then it's going to be really hard to make our schools diverse without increasing the already strain that we have on transportation.
Yep. Those are all really great points. And I'll even say, even if we were to try to put that extra strain on our transportation in the current political climate, but also in the current school choice climate, people wouldn't go. They'd go to a charter school, a private school would pop up. They would just say, no, I'm not going to be bused all the way far away. I'm just going to go to this other school. So what worked in the past doesn't work now. But what does work still, even though the magnet stops aren't the most efficient, we can at least pour resources into those unresourced schools through magnet programming, through other things like that, and hope to bring people to choose to go to a more diverse school. So.
Yeah, one last thing. When I was looking at these maps, because they're going to affect my nephew, who's now in elementary school, so these changes, when they get implemented, are going to affect the rest of his academic career. And looking at his current elementary school and what the current projection for neighborhood-wise, where he would go to middle and even high school if he stayed on that projection path, I looked at other schools that within our neighborhood, and you have a huge concentration of elementary schools that are feeding into a singular middle and a singular high school. Now, I'm going to presume that these schools are probably, with specifically the middle and the high schools, are already dealing with some sort of overcrowding.
Some of them are.
Yeah. When the changes are made, which according to what I looked at, there really won't be too much changes made. You may go from one school being at a currently 7-mile radius to shrinking it down to like a 3-mile radius as far as that being your neighborhood school. But you still have those same elementary schools feeding into those same middle and those same high schools, which on the onset looks like, okay, we're overcrowding. We're just stuffing and stuffing and stuffing. So to me, what is another component that needs to be looked at this is our current infrastructure ratio of elementary, middle, and high schools. We have a great abundance of elementary schools, a smaller number of middle, and even smaller number of high schools. So how can we expect students from so many elementary schools that serve so many communities to feed into a smaller number of middle schools and then an even smaller number of high schools without straining our transportation, strain on our resources and technology and teachers, allergies. And then on top of all that, not wanting to overcrowd our schools.
So let me speak to just a few of the things. You've said quite a bit, so hopefully you've put all that feedback in the dashboard as we are looking through this process. And so one of the things that we are looking at to be intentional with is capacity of numbers, capacity of how many students would be assigned to a school. That's important to not overcrowd schools, and you have to draw lines in a way that also doesn't under-enroll them, because then there's also a strain because you have few students. It's a lot of operational costs and not being able to allocate resources in the ways that is needed because of that. So hopefully with some of the things that she raised and just some of the conversation you're hearing, you understand the complexity of what we are tackling. And there's a lot of pieces and parts and moving things that we are trying to take into consideration to address a big thing, and take it into chunks over time. So school capacity is definitely a part of it. Typically, middle schools and high schools are built larger, that actually you bring more students together. So, you know, it's not uncommon for a school system to have more elementary schools that oftentimes serve smaller numbers of children, and then those elementary schools feed into a middle school or a few middle schools, and then those middle schools feed into a high school, or they may split and one go, you know, some go to this high school, some go to this high school. That's not uncommon. Those are some things that we're also trying to work through. Transportation, we're also trying to work through that too. If we reset our residential boundaries, what we're also looking at is how will that improve routing possibilities, number of bus drivers. We may not need as many bus drivers. Right now, we have a lot of routes that go uncovered, but if we reset things to make them more efficient, so it's just, there's a lot of pieces, which is why we're trying to have these conversations with the community to hear your thoughts, your input, recommendations. What are some, to ask us questions of things we may not even be thinking about, or may have missed. Like, that's why this engagement is so important for us to be having throughout this process. So I know time is kind of drawing near. So are there any other like pressing questions or, yes, sir. It is a reality. You're right. Yep, you're absolutely right. Same situation. Yep. Yep. Yep.
So I don't see a mental way or social way. How do you prevent the right unless you put the schools in such a way in certain communities that would bring diversity to it?
Mm-hmm.
Then what I had saw in the past, I think some of who did Kimberly Park, when they diversified it, so when that community wanted to go to Kimberly Park, had to get on the waiting list, or you were grandfathered in, and you just didn't couldn't go along.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You remember that possible?
Yeah.
So these, so I'm kind of feeling like we're starting over again, like reloading and starting over with the same concept.
Sometimes it feels that way with every I'm a researcher too, like that I love to do that, just read and research. So many things of what has been written about Winston-Salem, Forsyth County Schools, and the efforts after Brown versus Board. Hearing you actually talk about what that experience was kind of brings all that research to life, and we don't want to repeat a lot of those things. But I will say, when you've waited, when it's been this long a period of time that has transpired, and now you're trying to tackle rezoning, it rehashes a lot of those things that seem Like we just had this conversation and now we're having that same conversation again. So I hear you on that, because so many things that you're bringing up are things I've read about, talking with other community members, of hearing the same stories. That also helps us too, though, to understand what happened in the past and to work to try to not make the same missteps that happened. And so even thinking about, I don't even know all the ins and outs of whatever happened at Kimberly Park, but that wouldn't be something that we should be repeating. But we don't always know all of those things unless people who've lived it, they live in the community, they're connected with the schools, or family members can share those stories with us to help us to think about all the different perspectives, all of the different points of view, all of the things to make decisions. So bringing up very valid points. These are needed conversations to happen. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
When I look at fostering diverse schools,
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at map A, B, and C, and you have highlighted the percentage of diversity. When you say diversity, I'm thinking integration.
Mm-hmm.
Are they one and the same?
Are they one and the same?
Yes, and diversity sounds a lot better than integration.
So ultimately, we should. I shouldn't say we should. It depends on what is important into the community, because I don't believe in coming from a place of saying that the way that I see it or the way it needs to be is the right way. When we talk about fostering socioeconomic diversity, it's about bringing students together from different backgrounds to live, to work together, to learn together, and all those things. What we have heard from several students that we've been talking to is that this is important to them because they know when they leave high school, they're going to be going off to college, they're going into workforce. Some have talked about going into the military, and they're going to have to work and live alongside people who don't have the same backgrounds as them. So they see the value in it, and they say that it's important to them, and I totally understand that. And so bringing kids together from different backgrounds does help them to be prepared for life outside of high school, because we live in a global society. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
North Carolina, and there were a lot of college students,
Yep.
and the minority students were
Yep.
the ones who were mostly affected because
Mm-hmm.
because of the bus.
Right.
There were two benefits.
Yep.
I went to my park, one of the largest white schools, and so there were some successes. I learned a lot. We were able to work with students of different races and
Mm-hmm.
compete with them, and we had a lot of advantages because we would work together. But the downside is the minority students were the ones that had to try.
Yep.
And when I look at, 19% diversity, who will be doing most of the traveling in this situation? Are we looking at the inner city students?
Yep.
Will they be the ones who will be moving out, because we're
Yeah.
certainly not going to get
Right. Yep. And that's, yeah.
to allow their children to come into.
And that's so I know that's what happened before, and that's not what we want to do again, of busing kids. So we've been trying to be as clear as possible about not wanting to repeat that cycle of busing, which we wouldn't be able to do anyway, of saying, we're going to bus the inner city kids out to the county, and then the county kids. So we don't want to do that. And from what we've heard from the community, people on the outside wouldn't be in support of doing that, and people on the inside are not in support of that. What we have heard, though, is that what we have heard from people is that they would prefer to be closer. So even when I've talked to the Black community, I was with Hispanic community on Saturday, when I've talked to a white community, or even when it's been a mixture of people, a lot of people are saying that they want their children to be closer to be closer to where they would like for their child to go, closer to their school, to be closer to where they live versus far, far, far away. So the map options that are up here, what we want to hear from people is what they like about the different options, and there might be pieces that they like about different ones. So that first one was when we asked people to rank or prioritize things that were important, and for the people who said diversity was really important to them, what we tried to do was create a map, an option, an example to look at that says if we only wanted to create boundaries based on socioeconomic diversity only, this is what it could potentially look like. This is how much movement we could get. But then if you go back to where the stars are, where it becomes problematic, so we know none of these maps will be the final map. We want to hear from people what they like about different options, what's important, so that we can narrow it down to really kind of better options. So like we know in map A, it's gonna, on average, gonna increase people's drive times. That's what a lot of people said they don't want. We're already hearing that in the feedback. We don't want map A because of this. Now we hear some people say, I don't care about distance. We've heard that, but not in the larger numbers in comparison to people that say they don't want to travel far. The other thing, Frank normally gives this number, but like on map A, school feeder patterns of keeping kids together, right now we see on average, which is comparable to most districts our size, that kids would be split about 40 times, meaning I'm in this elementary school and how they split off, and then, well, that would go up to like 107. So that is not something that, because we heard parents and family and students say they want to stay with their friend groups over time, map A wouldn't even be a great option, but there may be elements of this map, particularly for people who really want to see more diversity in their schools, that say, I really like these aspects of it, and we're trying to take all of what we're learning to really refine it down. But I'm trying to answer in a way that shows you like all of the things we're grappling with, like all the questions that are being asked and the things that are coming out are all the things that we're hearing and trying to process out to make a good recommendation. But we're going to be coming back for more feedback, like after all of what's said here and everything that we've captured, going back to the drawing board with those and then bringing back some other options too. So we're not finished with the process. Yes.
First, I don't envy you all's effort.
I appreciate that.
I understand what it is you're trying to do.
Yeah.
But let's be real, because we know that people tend to move to a place based on school and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be very difficult for people with means to kind of want to move from a place where they chose to particularly go to that school.
Right.
Kind of saying,
Yeah.
okay, so that's the difficult part.
Yeah.
But then you've got another difficult part too. You got budget constraints. And I don't know. I think I heard something saying that we're looking at maybe this going into effect in 2026, 27, somewhere around there.
Yeah. Starting to try to phase in depending on what the board agrees to. Yep.
And I'll ask you in a moment, what is the ultimate goal you're hoping to be able to achieve? Because the diversity part is probably going to be, you may be able to get some, but
It's going to be the hardest.
more people
Absolutely.
actually move,
Yeah.
diversity is probably not going to be
Yep.
the end goal that you're going to be able to achieve.
Yep.
But what I would ask basically is, given the problems that we're seeing now, even right now, the district is facing funding shortages. Had a budget overrun, I guess this year, starting next year with one. And of course, we know what happens up in Raleigh. They're more concerned about getting tax breaks and sending money to charter schools. So, how's that going to affect what you're trying to do?
Yeah.
Even when you come up with a plan,
Yep.
are you going to have the money to fund what you're trying to do?
So that's a really good question. So one of the things we're looking at, and fortunately with the funding that we got through this grant, we're going to be able to bring in some people that are transportation experts to also help us look at elements. But the state of North Carolina gives an efficiency rating score to all school systems. Based on that efficiency rating score, they allocate a certain amount of money to support transportation. So that comes with all the things of getting kids to and from school on time and multiple aspects of transportation. So right now, this was discussed in some of our other public budget conversation, is that we're not getting all of the funding that we could potentially get, or in comparison to some other districts that have higher efficiency ratings. With better efficiency ratings, with resetting our residential boundaries to have them assign students based on proximity to homes and all of those. And we're trying to do all of these things based on things that have come up that's important. We know we may not be able to make great movement on all of them, but if we can get the maps to a place where we have better efficiency in those, then that can help us on our efficiency rating, which what we would project is that we would have more money that would come in to support transportation efforts. Also, just thinking about how many students ride the bus. So like some of the things that we're asking, like would you go to a new assigned school? Like we talked about in the next iteration, we also need to ask, like, would you ride the bus? Would you not ride the bus? You know, like, would you need transportation and things like that? So right now we have a pretty good estimate of, and it fluctuates, on how many kids ride the bus on average every day. Well, if we look at new map options and look at what routing updates would happen and things, would we still need all of the routes that we have, or is there ways that we would make that efficient? Like all of that goes into this process that we are actually going to be doing. So right now, these are real early maps of where we just really kind of wanted to we heard all this stuff, here's what possibilities could be. Now, based on these possibilities, what do you like, not like, what, you know, like all the questions that are coming up, really refine that, and then be able to say, this is how we can truly impact transportation. This is truly how it will look in terms of school capacity and enrollment. Like when I think about Parkland, Parkland is very overcrowded.
How do you make Parkland more desirable?
So,
What would that give you? How would that,
yep.
what would that do?
So that's a great question. So right now, Parkland is overcrowded. When I mentioned earlier, one of the students said, we just want y'all to do something because they're building all this stuff and we're on top of each other. So Parkland is one of them. It's a magnet school. That's an international baccalaureate magnet school, which in many communities is very highly sought after, because going through that you can get college credits, which long-term offsets costs for college for families, right? So we recently received about a $15 million grant from Magnet Schools of America. Parkland is one of the magnet schools that was a part of that funding. So what happens is we have magnet schools that have that are great programs. We haven't always had the funding to support building the solid foundation. We shouldn't be dependent on those federal funds for sustainability, but once you get a solid foundation, then you can sustain it over time. So this funding is really helping to provide the professional development, the additional resources and things like that Parkland would need, Flat Rock will need, Con Oak Elementary will need. There's still one that I keep leaving off. Paisley, I think. Say that again.
You also include any type of recruitment for teachers to actually come here?
I don't know all the ins and outs of the grant, but the funding does help with many of the resources that are needed that are directly connected to that magnet program to strengthen it, and then updating the boundaries to make Parkland less crowded, improving the program. Like if you shrink the boundary, improve the program, then it does give opportunity for families that live outside of that residential boundary to apply to be a part of the school. Yes, yes, and yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, and then we'll come back over here. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
This is the second time that I've been in this setting.
Yes, ma'am.
And every time that I've been, what I've seen is mostly grandparents when parents should be here. So it makes me wonder, has the parents heard all that they want to hear of this proposal? Have they become discouraged by it? And as the grandparents and as members of the community, we're asking questions, but we're not exactly getting answers. Mm-hmm. And if we're to go back into the community and convince the community that this is a great thing to do and it won't take 30 more years to be successful, then just suggesting that maybe going back to the table and revising the proposal to answer some of the questions that have already been put before you. Because when I go to the community to speak, I want to be sure of what it is that I'm saying to the people. Because even though I have no children or grandchildren in Forsyth County Schools, that doesn't say I won't have great-grandchildren in Forsyth County Schools. Mm-hmm. And I want to know that they're getting the best education in the best locations with the best teachers. Yep. So when I go into the community, I want to be sure of what I'm saying to the people in the community.
Yep. Thank you for that. So when we were here last Monday, there weren't a lot of parents here, and one of the parents said there should be more parents here. So I'm not sure. I don't know if I've heard. I guess I've heard some mixed things, but I will say this: one of the reasons why there are not a lot of answers is because we're still in a planning process of trying to gather the feedback, gathering the information. Once we've processed all that information and can truly come forward with a recommendation before we take it to the school board, then we can say, here's what we're recommending. Right now, what we're trying to do is do our due diligence on the research, do our due diligence on learning, doing our due diligence on listening, like the stories that have been shared here tonight help us to make decisions. So there's no final plan yet, and we've been trying to stress that across the entire county, that there isn't a final plan yet because we're in the process of planning and trying to gather all of the perspectives, all of the information that we possibly can about what's important to people, how they would like things to look, and what they think implementation should look like, so that we can use that and be able to say, here's what we're recommending, and we're recommending those things because we heard this clearly from the community. We heard this. So that's why there's just not a lot of answers right now. What we do ask people is to encourage the community to say, if they don't know, did you know that the district is looking at this? Here's why they're looking at it, and they want you to get engaged in the process to come alongside them as they try to grapple with a really tough decision, to develop a plan. That's what we're in this planning phase of what to do to develop a plan to be able to take to the board. So hopefully that's helpful. Sometimes it's that we should have the answers immediately. We just don't have, we could have done like some districts do, where they say this needs to be changed. They work behind the scenes, and then they come and they just say, this is what we're gonna do, and this is how we're gonna roll it out. And they might give some opportunity for feedback. But we were really been trying to work on a different process that does not do that to the community. So.
One thing I was thinking about when you talk about transportation is that it's safe when you have kindergarten children out as the time changes going into late August, September. It's dark. And you have little kids out there on the bus stop. And every child out there does not have a parent sitting out there with them to monitor their child. So, because of that, I think that's what had happened 30 years ago. at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, waiting for a bus. And so safety would have to be definitely considered
Okay.
when you all present this, because I know
Yeah.
I would put my elementary kid out there on the bus stop at 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning.
And what I hear you saying in that, which is important, is the time that it would take a child to get from home to school, if they're already having to drive a long ways, 45 minutes means I got to be out at the bus stop a lot earlier, right? So distance from school to home matters, and how long I got to be on the bus. That's one. The other thing that I'm hearing you say that we need to be able to say to the school board and to the district that needs to take a serious look at is bail schedules. So with bail schedules, that's been something else that's kind of started, to look at how we change bail schedules, like the start time, end time, and all of that. And it started and it stopped. It started and it stopped. So those are the two things that I'm hearing. Like, distance from home to school makes a difference on what time a child has got to be out there for that bus. And it's going to make a difference in what time their school day ends and how long it's going to take them to get home and what time they get home. But then those bill schedules are also something else that the district is going to have to grapple with to impact what time schools start, which then impacts what time I got to be out there to be ready for the bus. So that adds another layer that's, all of those things are kind of interconnected. We can't solve all of it, but we're trying to start somewhere, and we know there's lots of other pieces, so that gives some context for some other pieces. Absolutely. Yep. Yep. There has been conversation. I know this is off of maps, but there has been conversation. I know in the last couple of years, 2 to 3 years, that have kind of started, then stopped, about shifting what time children start school. So there's been some conversations about elementary schools actually starting later versus, going early. Like right now, middle schools start first, basically, because they're at school at about 7:20 in the morning. So they're on the bus the earliest in the morning, and then it's middle school, then it's elementary, and then it's high school. So there has been some conversation. Nothing has changed, but there has been some conversations about shifting that. That's like a whole other body of work, too. But yeah, right. And that has come up too, like that may cause problems with parents getting their, being able to get to work, and same kind of thing. So it's like, I think going back to your question over here about being able to be specific with plans, it's like all of the things that are coming up in terms of the moving parts is why we don't have definitive answers for everything, because you got to try to, in a planning process, you're trying to uncover all of the things and then say, where should be your starting point? If this is our starting point, how might this look? And then how do you move from there? That's what we're trying to figure out through all of this. We do need to hear from more younger parents that have children in schools. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and we're not tackling choice with this, but like all the things y'all are raising are things we want to hear. Because if we were to say we're going to do away with choice, then to your point, we're going to probably have a lot of white flight. Or if we say go this route, that may happen, but then over here we're causing harm to the black community or Hispanic community. So it's a lot of dynamics that we're grappling with. So like these conversations are welcomed and appreciated as we just try to think through all of the things and questions and things that people are raising. Yes, and then yes. Mm-mm. It's not. Yeah.
I would say to you, committed, continue doing what you're doing, and we will try our level best to get more young parents out to these homes
Mm-hmm.
because they're the ones that it's going to affect.
Absolutely. We're going to be tapping into Freedom Schools this summer, if you are familiar with Freedom School. We met with Freedom School families last summer. We're going to do that again this summer. We would even love, if you have recommendations, other recommendations. We're trying to uncover every stone on how to connect with people. So grassroots organizations, churches, like we're trying to run the gamut. Whitney probably gets a little frustrated with me because she's like, Dr. Effie, we can't add another meeting. And I'm like, but we've got to go. It doesn't matter if it's two people there, like we need we need to hear from the community. So any other recommendations, and when we get ready to come back out with another round of drafts and need that kind of input, we have a great working relationship with Emmanuel Baptist Church. Anybody who's in here and other organizations you're affiliated with, please make sure that before you leave, you take one of the little brochures with you so that you can stay connected. Reach out to us. We're going to want to connect with you to say we're coming back again. However you can help us to get more people in the space to talk to, we want to talk to as many people as possible, particularly families that have children currently. And if you know of people who have little ones, 2, 3 newborns, they're going to have children in the school system eventually. Like we need to know what's important for them for the future of Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. So we thank you all for coming out tonight on a Monday night. We really appreciate you being here. Taking the time, please share. Help us get families connected. Everything that can I just say this? I feel like I'm in a safe space. Every time we are trying to connect with families and stuff, we are trying to do all the things that we know to do, and we don't know all. But we don't always have the participation that's needed and necessary. And I know y'all know that's important. That's important for us too. And we can't do this alone. It's going to take the whole community to do all the things. Even if you don't have more diversity, we have schools that have needs. And how can we pull our resources together as a community and really benefit the children that we're serving, and particularly the kids that need it the most in some of our most marginalized, underserved communities. So it's definitely not an easy feat that task that we've taken on, and we have a lot of other big, complex issues we've got to try to solve too. But we need the community to help us to do it. We do. So thank y'all. Have a wonderful night. Thank you, Whitney.